Okay, so this video is going to be a bit of a mess. Pretty much what happened is that I reacted to this video, I nearly finished editing it, and then I found an article about the person that I'm reacting to, and turns out the story is a lot more sinister than I thought. I'm not going to film another reaction video about this. I'm going to say what I think about it before and after I react it, but, you know, I feel like it'll be a bit weird if I reacted to it a second time because, like, I've already reacted to it. I'll let you watch the video, hopefully it'll make sense to you, but pretty much, I thought that this girl transitioned, and then she made a mistake, she detransitioned, she was like, oh, it sucks, and she just wanted to tell her story. Turns out, you know, she's trying to sue the NHS. She's trying to sue the gender clinic, which is unfair because that will affect thousands of trans people's lives just because she made a mistake. It's just completely changed my entire outlook on this. I had a bit of a rant just before I show you the reaction, so this whole video, wow. I'll let you see for yourself. Hello, underachievers. Sorry about this, I'm in isolation right now, I can't get a haircut. So, today's video idea I stole from Jackson Milo, so if you want to watch his version of this, click the link in the description. So, this video is about a detransitioner, and if you don't know what a detransitioner is, it's somebody who detransitions, as in they transition because they think they're trans, and then maybe they realise they're not, maybe they realise it's not the right time, they detransition. So it would be like me, I've already transitioned, it would be like me turning back into a girl. That's, yeah, think of that. Just want to put a disclaimer out there. I don't have an issue with detransitioners. I don't have a single issue with someone detransitioning. I'm actually happy that people detransition because it means that they're more comfortable in themselves. Obviously, if they transition, realise it's not for them, then detransitioning would be like, oh, that was a relief. Like, I'm happy that they're living their authentic lives. I'm not mad at them because obviously people make mistakes. Not everyone's gonna know everything about themselves. I actually went to the gender clinic a few weeks ago and I talked to the woman that I had an appointment with, and she asked me about detransitioning. She pretty much said that, like, less than 1% of people that medically transition actually detransition. The media have just blown it up to be some massive thing. But also something really interesting that she said to me was that most people detransition not because they don't think they're trans, but because the people around them aren't supportive, and they're not really experiencing a healthy environment to transition. So a lot of people don't detransition because they're not trans, they detransition because, you know, maybe it wasn't the right timing. I feel like I kind of went on a rant. I'm gonna watch this video.
Here is Angry Noah, halfway through the edit.
Okay, so hello, I'm back. I've just got some more news on this story. I didn't actually know this because the video didn't mention it, but the person in this video, Keira Bell, is currently trying to sue the NHS for negligence on her treatment. Just reading the article, it says, a 23-year-old woman who is taking legal action against an NHS gender clinic says she should have been challenged more by medical staff over her decision to transition to a male as I can't even finish reading that. This completely changes my outlook on this whole thing. I thought I was being maybe a bit judgmental, maybe I was being a bit too harsh on her, but the fact of the matter is, she's trying to sue the NHS. The NHS, the National Health Service that so many people need, and so many people need these gender clinics. If I didn't have these gender clinics, I would not be able to transition, and if I wasn't able to transition, I cannot tell you what would happen if I couldn't transition. The NHS is already incredibly underfunded, thank you Tories for that. I just think it's really unfair for her to sue the NHS over a decision that she also had to make. You have to sign a consent form in order to start treatment, in order to have testosterone, in order to have top surgery. There are so many hurdles that you have to go through in order to medically transition. Part of this legal action she's taking, let me just have a look here. Lawyers will argue children cannot give informed consent to treatment delaying puberty or helping them to transition. This means that these trans people will not be able to give consent to start medical treatment. They won't be able to transition until after they are like 18. That is screwed up. To some kids, they need to transition. They are fully informed of what they're doing. You have to sign consent forms. You have to read so many things. There are so many hurdles you have to go through. There are so many barriers to get through in order to medically transition. I'm sorry. I'm annoyed.
When I was 16, I started on puberty blockers, and I was on that for a year, and I continued with it for an extra year along with cross-sex hormones, and then I was on cross-sex hormones for about 4.5 years.
Okay, 4.5 years is a long time to be on testosterone and then regret it afterwards. Just to bring things into perspective, I've been on testosterone almost 2 years.
During that time that I was on cross-sex hormones, I underwent a double mastectomy procedure where I had my breast removed.
Okay, so not only did she go... Wow, okay. That must be horrible. That must be horrible, but... Oh, Jesus. Right, so she's been on testosterone 4.5 years and then she got top surgery. That is... Wow. Wow, that is hard. Like, just imagining, like, any cis girls out there, you got your boobs? Sorry, is that weird to say? Imagine you just got your boobs chopped off and then you were like, oh hell, I regret that. Like, that's horrible, right?
And that was the end of the process for me, and I came off of the hormones just last year, yeah.
How tough is that process of change?
It is very difficult. I know initially I felt very relieved and very happy about things, but I think as the years go on, you start to feel less and less enthusiastic or even happy about it.
I feel like that's a weird thing for her to have said, because she's, like, she's using terms that are kind of general statements when I feel like she should be talking about her experience, because not everybody experiences that. I'm not less happy about being on testosterone than I was when I started.
It just depends how you want to live, really. You can either choose to continue with that sort of life and, you know, continue to dig yourself deeper into this hole, or you can choose to kind of, you know, come out of that and have the weight lifted off of your shoulders and just live, you know, naturally and how you are as truly. Yeah.
So obviously I have an issue with this. I feel like she's projecting a lot of her issues. Maybe I'm just being sensitive about it because obviously I'm trans. Living naturally and how I am truly, well, this is how I am now, but before that, I wanted to die. Choosing to come out of this and have the weight lifted off your shoulders, I understand that maybe that's how she felt. But not gonna lie, when I got my tits chopped off, that weight was lifted off my entire body. That was like, I was so, like, that was the best thing ever, not gonna lie. I don't have an issue with her detransitioning. I kind of have an issue with the way she's putting things as if it's something that everybody experiences.
How old were you when you started to question your gender?
I was about 14, and things had kind of been bubbling under the surface for years, really, because I always kind of felt different from a very young age, and it wasn't, you know, very prominent until I reached kind of early teen years, you know, when I was 14, and that's when, you know, I think it was more of a problem that society had rather than I had with myself, looking back on it.
That's kind of, it makes sense that someone that was born a female, you know, they would experience negative things towards their gender because, you know, misogyny. Like, hell yeah, women aren't given the same respect as men. Like, that sucks. Like, hell yeah, that sucks. I don't mean hell yeah as in, like, hell yeah, that's great. I mean, hell yeah, it's understandable that that's a negative thing, and surely you would, you know, maybe not everybody would, like, question their gender because of it. I find that kind of weird, but I guess it's like a confusion thing. I'm sure a lot of people that were born girls, you know, have some negative experiences with being girls just because of the way that they're treated.
So if society had allowed you to dress as you wanted, be the person you wanted without judgment,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have felt the pressure to change.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have felt the pressure, you know. There's no way of saying how I would have really felt if things were different. You know, looking back, I do feel like that would have been a big thing, and yeah, it wouldn't have made me feel so pressured.
And as a teenager, how strongly did you feel that need to change physically?
I didn't feel too strongly about it until I looked into how the process went with every case, and I kind of found out how that was through the internet. And yeah, it wasn't until I kind of visited my GP and I started in the process that I kind of built up the urgency to change. I just felt like each step I consistently felt the need to change more in order to feel better, because, you know, each step it didn't really make me feel better as I went along, looking back on it.
What do you think about that now?
I would have liked to have, you know, some sort of intensive therapy, really.
Okay, like, intensive therapy, fair enough. If she felt like that's what she needed, then that's what she needed. I don't know. I don't know, I have nothing to comment.
I think that I should have been challenged on the proposals or the, you know, the claims that I was making for myself.
See, I don't think that's a fair statement to make. You should have been challenged on the statements that you were making about yourself. Challenged, I feel like, isn't the correct word, because if you go to a doctor, you go to someone to seek help, and you tell them something about yourself that, you know, you're yourself, you know yourself the best. If you tell them something about yourself, they're not going to be like, well, I challenge that. I understand that maybe you should have considered things more. Well, obviously you should have considered things more because now you detransitioned, but, like, I don't want to put the blame on anyone, but realistically, you went to these people to seek treatment, so that's what they gave you.
I think that would have made a big difference as well.
There will be young people who say going to the clinic literally saves their lives because it is essential someone listens to them and believes their need to change. What would you say to that?
Well, I did say the same thing, years ago when I went to the clinic. It felt like, it was saving me from, suicidal ideation and just depression in general. And, at the time I felt like it relieved all of those mental health conditions that I was, struggling alongside, gender dysphoria. It's something you need to kind of work through, but it's not something that should be rushed into.
Okay, so that's a lot to say. So, yes, you shouldn't rush your transition if... It's kind of difficult. Like, I think if I didn't transition at the point I transitioned, my life would be ridiculously different. I don't know how I would have dealt with it, because by the time I transitioned, I was already, like, on the edge. I was like, wow, like, if this doesn't happen, I don't know how I'm gonna deal with it. So, like, yes, not rushing into it is important. It gives you time to, like, think over it. But I just feel like, I was completely sure of myself, I was incredibly sure of myself, and that's something that I needed at that point in my life. I feel like by the time that you've gone to a clinic, you've referred yourself to a clinic, you've gone to your GP, to talk about the fact that you're trans, I feel like, you've already considered that. Like, you don't just go there if you're like, oh, maybe I could be trans. You go there because you're like, okay, well, I think I'm trans. I don't know, I feel like rushing into it is a different thing for every person. Maybe she rushed into it.
What would you tell your 16-year-old self now?
That's a hard question, because I feel like I could say anything to my 16-year-old self, but I might not necessarily listen at that time, and that's kind of the point of this case, is that when you are that young, you don't really want to listen to anyone, and a lot of things won't get through.
I feel like a lot of this interview is just her projecting herself onto, like, every other person that went through a similar experience. Like, not everybody who's 16 doesn't want to listen to people. Maybe that's a thing that you experience, but I know that when I was 16 and I was talking to people about similar kind of things, I listened to what they thought about it. Like, sure, I knew for a fact that I was trans, I knew that that was a thing, but I still considered things people told to me.
So, I think it's up to these, institutions like the Tavistock to step in and make children reconsider what they're saying.
I don't think Tavistock should make children reconsider what they're saying. If you don't know what Tavistock is, it's the gender clinic services, but Tavistock is like the child clinic services, so people under 18 go to Tavistock, to seek treatment or to seek therapy. I don't think it's a gender clinic's job to make trans people reconsider their transness. I don't think that's their job. I think maybe they should talk it through with them and, maybe be like, is this how you feel? Is this how you feel? Or maybe you feel like this because of this. I don't feel like reconsider is the word. Although maybe I'm being pedantic. Maybe she didn't quite mean, like, reconsider. Maybe that's just the word she used. I'm not trying to be pedantic, but there's a lot of... The current theme of this interview is that she's projecting, And even though she's projecting, it's her experience, but she's kind of stating it as if it's everybody's experience. I don't know. Whatever. I'm probably talking a lot of shit.
Because it is, a life-altering path that you're going down, and it's not guaranteed to work.
Do you feel any anger about what's happened in the last 5-10 years for you?
I do, yeah. I feel angry that, no one was there to really say any different, and I was allowed to run with this idea that I had, or, almost like a fantasy as a teenager. I was allowed to run with that.
Okay, like, I get that. If I was in her situation, I would be angry too, but I also feel like she's putting a lot of blame on the services that are put there to help people. Like, it clearly wasn't the right route for you to go down, but I don't think it's fair to blame the fact that you regret transitioning on Tavistock. When you're at a gender clinic, you work together with the person you're with. Like, they ask you your experience. I was asked at my first gender clinic appointment, have you considered living a masculine female role? As in, like, being a girl still, but just being masculine. That was something that I was asked, and I'm pretty sure that's something that a lot of people are asked in their clinic appointments. Like, it's not like you go to a gender clinic appointment and you're just like, I'm trans, put me on hormones, because believe me, that is not what happens. I know people that were there for 4 years and they weren't even considered for transition, so I don't think it's fair to, like, insinuate that these clinics are just, like, fast-tracking these kids onto hormones, because that's not what happens. I literally know, I think, 1 or 2 people that went to Tavistock that started hormones there. And I know a lot of trans people, and I know a lot of trans people that went to the Tavistock. It's unfortunate, and I do feel bad for you that you went through this, and it's probably, like, the worst thing. Like, it probably sucks ass. But I just feel like there has to be some responsibility taken on your side, and I don't feel like there is any. Sorry, the battery died. So if you go to a doctor for anxiety or depression, right? You think you have anxiety or depression. You tell the doctor, like, all the symptoms that you have, and they match up with anxiety and depression. The doctor is going to treat you for anxiety and depression if you tell them that that's what you have. The doctor is not going to know how you feel internally. They're not going to know that because they're not you. And that's not to say it's entirely your fault that this happened to you, because yes, maybe there should have been more discussion with the clinic. But that's not really something that she's mentioned at all. She's just kind of been like, oh, well, I'm really angry that this has happened to me. And it's not something that happened to you. Yes, maybe there should have been more discussion, but you still entered yourself into that space. Does this sound like... I don't want to sound like I'm blaming her, but I feel like there's a responsibility on both sides.
How do you want to identify now?
Just as a human, being living in society, I am accepting of my, my sex, which is female, and I'm just taking each day as it comes, and I'm not trying to force other people's perceptions of me, and I'm not trying to force myself to feel any particular way about myself either. So I'm just happy to be doing something and turning the negatives that have happened in recent years into positives.
Yeah, fair enough, that's pretty admirable, not gonna lie. Like, that must be a terrible thing to go through, and being able to turn it into a positive thing, sure, fair enough, you do you. This kind of thing is, like, tricky to talk about, because there's already so much negativity in the UK about trans people, about trans services, about anything to do with trans things. There's so much negativity around it, and people, like, I don't even know her name, did she say her name? People like her need to be heard. Like, they definitely, their voices need to be heard, because it's an experience that I'm sure a few people have gone through, and, if we can help to stop that happening, we should do that. I just feel like when it comes to these kinds of things, it's really dangerous to not be very particular about the way you word things, because the way that I took this is that she's kind of not really taking her part of responsibility for what happened, because at the end of the day, she went to these clinics, she told these clinicians that she had gender dysphoria and that she was trans, and she got treated for that. And yes, maybe there should have been more discussion, like I said, absolutely, maybe there's a hole in the system that we need to sort out. But I don't like that nowadays there's this whole idea that, like, child clinics and, like, gender clinics are, like, pushing children and pushing adults to transition if they're not trans, because that's truly not happening at all. I cannot tell you how difficult it is for some people to medically transition in the UK. So, that's the reaction I had initially. Right now, how do I feel about it? I'm pretty angry about it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty upset by it. I understand that she's upset, that she transitioned, she regretted it. Sure, there were some things that maybe the clinic could have done better, but realistically, the responsibility of transitioning is on you. The clinic put things in place so that you can't just transition, and you can't just, go in there, get testosterone and leave, because that's not how it works. You have to sign many forms, you have to have many appointments in order to access this treatment. You have to sign a consent form, and they have to read through you every part of the consent form so that you're fully informed of what you're doing. It's an informed consent form. You have to do that for testosterone, and also, obviously, you have to do that for top surgery. Clinics don't go around just handing out testosterone, handing out estrogen, and just chopping people's tits off. That's not what happens. Every step of the process, there is a hurdle in line in order to stop people transitioning when they shouldn't. I'm annoyed that she thinks it's appropriate to sue the NHS. I'm sure, yes, of course she's upset. I understand why she's upset. She's probably going through something that's very difficult. It's not something that I can relate to or understand, but I feel empathy for that. I feel sorry for her. Taking legal action against the NHS so that people can't consent to having these treatments that they need is not the way to go. Just because you made a mistake does not mean that all of these people are making mistakes like you did. I don't know. I just think it's screwed up. I think it's really screwed up. And you made a mistake. Yes, the clinic could have done more, but at the end of the day, you signed those consent forms. You were given all these steps. Oh, it's just annoying, bro. I'm annoyed.